My name's Marcus Chen. I'm a freelance illustrator. This is really just a glorified show and tell. But the way I thought I would approach this, because I am doing a lecture later on this afternoon that's a bit more formal, is I wanted to, I guess, focus more on, because you're all students, the transition from my being a student to a professional, and just so you could really see the kind of work that I've done over the past. I've been working for about 11 years. So you could see the kind of work that I was doing in art school until now. And I'm also an instructor at the School of Visual Arts in New York, and one thing that I like to do is to bring my studio practice into the classroom, and I experiment and I play around a lot with process. So in addition to being an illustrator, freelance illustrator, where my work's rooted mostly in editorial and advertising illustration, I also do a lot of different types of projects like silk screening, sewing, sculpture, etc. But my primary medium is the computer. And for those of you who are familiar with my work, all of it is done using vectors, Adobe Illustrator. Well, most of it is. Some of it's using Photoshop. But before I show you that, I wanted to show you some of, maybe I should just have you guys look at the kind of work that I do now, because I'm sure not everyone is familiar with the kind of work that I do now. But I just, brought a portfolio of some of my pieces, and I'm just going to have you guys pass this around because it'll give you a chance to have a closer look at some of the images that I've done. And these particular illustrations are all published work, and this is the book that I send out to clients if they ever call, because nowadays they don't really call for your portfolio anymore. So I haven't really sent out my portfolio in a long time, but they check my website. So if you want, you can.
I was going to ask, what do they do now?
What do I?
What do they do now?
They look at my website. Yeah, it's kind of, if you don't have a website, you don't exist. That's kind of what it's become. It's come down to that. So I really haven't gotten a call to send out my book in about a year or so, or more. So there's also some postcards for you guys to see, and that's a sample of some of the work that I've done. And also, feel free to just interject and ask questions. I want to keep this really intimate, an intimate experience. But as I said, when I was in school, I was doing very different work. And here are some samples of it for you guys to see, because I think, at least when I was a student, I was trapped into a way of thinking where I thought the kind of paintings and drawings that I was doing in school would be the kinds of work that I would be doing upon graduation. But it was not that way at all. So when I was in school, and again, you guys can crowd in if you want. Some people can stand here. No, I wasn't. I was doing purely paintings and drawings, with microns, with gouache, acrylics and alkyds, but I'm trying to find like one of the first pieces. This is one of the first pieces I ever did, which is here. It's just acrylic paint on acetate overlay on top of an ink and watercolor wash. And I think I was like 18 or 19 years old when I did this. And part of the reason why I approached this drawing or illustration this way is because I wanted to be an animator when I was young, but for personal reasons I wasn't allowed to study animation. But here are some, take it, pass it around, it's fine. Yeah, don't be shy, I like it interactive. And again, it's just, some samples of work that I was doing back then. Acrylic and alkyds on illustration board. I was a huge fan of Anita Coombs. She was my hero, another Canadian illustrator artist. I did these in 3rd and 4th year mostly. And again, just for you guys to see where I started, because I think the beginning is always kind of this gray area where you're not sure how to begin, you're not sure what you're going to be doing next. A 2nd year assignment that I did, a self-portrait in art college, learning how to use materials, different types of paints, different surfaces, et cetera, et cetera. So here's some more. So these are just sort of samples, again. Just learning how to tell stories through my pictures. And I did this for about 4 years, 2 years out of school as well. And after graduation, even though I did get some work freelancing in in this kind of style that you see here, it was really difficult because it didn't really represent the kind of work that I wanted to do. And so that's when I started to use the computer. And that's when I sort of self-taught myself to use the computer. And I started to use Adobe Illustrator, and I started to create pieces that were all digital. Because again, I know some of you are seniors, I did a lot of promos, and so I brought some of my promos so you could see. I don't come from a family that has a lot of money, and as a result, when it came to creating promotional items, I couldn't have them professionally printed. So what I did is I used computer labs, such as the one across the hallway there, to create my own promos. I would print out my images on large full-scap sheets of cardstock and cut them down into 4 by 6 inch cards, and then send them out to clients. And this is actually one of the first promos that I did. It's just a portrait that I did in art college, but this is just a result of going into the computer lab and printing out images on these large sheets of paper. And I did a lot of these types of promotional mailers, a lot of 4 by 6 postcards, which I'm sure you guys are probably doing right now. And I just basically sent them out to my dream clients and those people who I wanted to work with over several years. And I also tried different types of promotional mailers as well, some that were more sort of multi-fold, tri-fold. And I did this because I felt as though it had more of an impact. Doing something like this, I felt would talk to art directors and show them that I could carry a larger body of work to get hired for a series instead of just one single illustration. And I felt as though these became very effective promotional items in order to get work. And sort of in between that, I would send out just a 4 by 6 postcard to make sure that I kept in touch with the people who I wanted to work with and who I was working with. And here are some of the examples of the work that I was doing back then.
When you work digitally, do you always use a tablet or do you draw something and scan it?
Well, at this stage of the game, these images, which were really flat, and you guys can pass this around, it's the same book. But the kinds of images that I was doing back then, these types of images, very sort of fashion illustrated images, flat, vector, these had no preliminary drawing at all. And that's part of the reason why the images look really stylized. But as I sort of progressed, I started out with a pencil underdrawing that I scanned in and then used Adobe Illustrator to trace on top of that because it gave me more control and helped me lift my skill and technique to a level that I wanted it to be at. And this is the 2 white books that you see being passed around. This was my first portfolio. And it's really funny, the reason why they're white is because back then I thought that illustrators were sending out black portfolio leather-bound cases, and I wanted to be the guy who stood out. So I was like, I want to be the guy with the white book. So I asked my friend Lila in bookmaking if she could teach me how to hand bind a book, and that's what I did. Unfortunately, it doesn't function very well. The pages don't stay open, but for me, this was a great process to learn, to sort of take my first step into freelance illustration and sort of pound the pavement with that. And again, here are some other books if you wanted to see. I really sort of was playful with the way that I approached image making in my illustration career, especially at the beginning. And just so many different types of books that I made because I was caught up in trying to stand out in that capacity. But after realizing that a Wacom would be better, I decided to purchase one. And this is really what I use now. I have a larger size tablet that I use, and it's not because I find it better. I actually prefer a smaller one, and the reason why I use the smaller one is because I only use this size space when I draw. The larger one, even though it has a large kind of space to move around, I just don't use it. I bought a larger one because that's what was available at the store, and I needed one at the time. But part of the reason why I put this sheet of paper on top is because I was trained traditionally as a drawer and a painter, and so I still love the tactility of the surface on which I'm applying my material. And this really helps to mimic that. Because if I take it off and just use, my tablet against the plastic surface, it slips too much, and this helps to sort of slow it down and really sort of recreates that experience of using, charcoal or a pencil on top of, cans and paper, scrap or whatever. I even use like Xerox paper as well, just regular 8.5 by 11 photocopy paper. It's enough to sort of create a texture for me to sort of, draw with. I also do a lot of experiments using different materials. I take a lot of night classes. I've done night classes in silk screening and sewing. I've done fine art residencies in painting. And I feel like that's really important because it helps to, I think, lift my commercial work. I think one thing informs the other. Personal work informs commercial work. My commercial work informs my personal work. And that really inspired me to create a secondary studio practice within my studio, which was printmaking. And I love silk screening. And here are just some samples of some of the silk screens that I've done. It's a very sort of DIY setup, do it yourself, but if you ever visit my studio, it's plastered with paper and drawings and prints. And I really try to, see, look, this is actually my studio. Like, I just basically throw things around. But these are some prints that I've done in my studio. Just very sort of straightforward, black and white. And then I've gotten into more sort of 4-color. And this is all done using a light table, light exposure unit that I built by researching online off of, I think I found it off of YouTube and another site, how to build a light exposure unit. And so again, these are some drawings that I made. And part of the reason why I do this, part of the reason why I explore hand-drawn or create pictures that are hand-drawn in addition to digital is because if I spend too much time working on the computer, I find that I need a break. But if you were to come to my studio, you'll see that I do so much more, I do, different types of drawings. And it's really important for me to continue this type of work because it just keeps the process fresh, keeps me engaged in whatever I'm doing. And I've come to a point where I don't really care if I have an audience for all the work that I do anymore. And when I sort of get to that point in my process, I really start to feel happy as I'm sort of working. So these are some personal pieces that I've been working on.